The Bear Essentials podcast gives older bears a place to gather for real talk regarding topics and issues that they can relate to. Here at The Bear Essentials, we aren't just having conversations. We are looking to provide actionable intelligence through real-life experience and expertise of our guests. Our mission is to build a strong community that elevates and motivates people to go beyond their limiting beliefs by helping them realize that getting older is not an excuse to hibernate on their goals, but a reason to work harder.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Charles Wallace. Today's guest is a former Major General from the United States Army. He dedicated his life to protecting our freedom. Now, he has a new mission, and that mission is to raise awareness for mental health. He is doing that by courageously and openly speaking about his own struggles with mental illness, specifically bipolar disorder. He has written a best-selling book, The Bipolar General, My Forever War with Mental Illness. So, without further ado, let's welcome Major General Gregg F. Martin to the show. But first, a word from our sponsor. Wolfinger Consulting, experts who have achieved real results for their clients, including complying efficiently and successfully with overwhelming discovery orders, passing difficult third-party security audits, and deploying bleeding-edge technology platforms to control and preserve corporate information. Let them show you what Wolfinger Consulting can do for you. Be sure to check out their webpage at wolfingerforensics.com. Hey, General Martin, how you doing? Really happy to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining.
I'm doing great, Charles. Thanks so much for having me on.
Hey, it's a real honor to have you back on. I had you on a previous episode, and since then, really, really exciting and big news was you actually have written a book about your story, The Bipolar General. Thank you so much for the advanced copy. Had a chance to read it. It's still an incredible story and an incredible journey you had. So I won't go back too far, but for anyone who may have missed the first episode, could you maybe give a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Born and grew up near Boston. All my life, I was, very, very successful. So like in high school and beyond, really top student, athlete, leader, all through high school, captain of the teams, all that sort of thing. On to West Point, graduated really high in my class, Army Ranger School. And then my time as a platoon leader and company commander out in the field Army really went well. And I got nothing but top-notch ratings all the way through. And in my spare time, I ran 7 marathons, all of them under 3 hours. And when the Army decided to send me to grad school, they said, your mission is to get 1 master's degree. And I got 2 masters and a Ph.D. And the reason I say this is I had what you call a hyperthymic personality, which is a condition in the brain where the brain produces and distributes large amounts of powerful chemicals like dopamine, which then give extraordinary energy, enthusiasm, drive to a person. So I was really, blessed and fortunate that I had that condition. And it really, it put me on the bipolar spectrum where I was just, year by year, inching my way towards real bipolar disorder, real mania. And of course, that came in 2003 during the Iraq War, where I was a brigade commander in charge of thousands of troops in combat. And so both the Army and the VA said that it was the pressure, the stress, the thrill, the euphoria of my combat experience that it triggered my genetic predisposition for bipolar disorder. And at that point, when we attacked from Kuwait into Iraq, it was such a high. I went into mania. And it was a high-performing mania where I felt like Superman. My brain was working quicker and better than ever before in my life. I was all over the battlefield, had endless energy, was pretty much fearless during the war, under fire often. And then when we got back to Germany after a year in Iraq, I sunk into almost a year's worth of depression, because the thrill and the euphoria of combat were behind. And so my brain then stopped producing all this excess dopamine and other chemicals, and it underproduced, which then drove me into depression. For the next 11 years, my manic highs got higher and higher. My depressive lows got lower and lower. My psychosis, consisting of hallucinations and delusions, they got stronger and stronger. And so over the next 11 years, my bipolar disorder was unknown, unrecognized, undetected, undiagnosed until 2014. I went into what they call full-blown mania, essentially a state of madness, a state of insanity. And at that point, I was basically fired from my job because I was so out of control, over the top, off the rails, disruptive. And, basically I got called in. My boss was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey. And so he called me in, and basically I didn't know whether I was going to get promoted, fired, extended in command. But he said, "Gregg, I love you like a brother. You've done an unbelievable job. I give you an A+, but your time as president of National Defense University is over. You have till 5 p.m. today to resign, or I will fire you. And I'm ordering you to get a psychiatric evaluation this month at Walter Reed." In fact, I got 3 psychiatric evaluations, and all 3 of them misdiagnosed me and said that I was fit for duty, perfectly healthy, nothing wrong. Oh, by the way, I think I'm probably the only person in history who was both fired and then told to get a psych eval in the same meeting by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I then spiraled and then crashed into terrible depression, terrible psychosis, and went into what I call bipolar hell for about 2 years. And I was hospitalized at a VA hospital. And I couldn't break the depression, and I kept getting worse and worse and worse until we tried lithium, which is a natural salt. And so I started taking lithium a little over 7 years ago. And once I started taking it, within days, my depression lifted, the psychosis vanished, and I've been on a journey of recovery for the last 7 years. And I call it a journey because it's basically an endless, forever war. Bipolar disorder never gets cured. It never goes away. You have to manage it for your whole life. The really bad thing about bipolar disorder and other mental illnesses is that left unattended, they often result in destroyed marriages, families, finances, careers, addiction, homelessness, prison, death, or suicide. That's pretty common. But the good news is that if you get diagnosed and you manage the disease and you do the right steps, which I'd be happy to talk about my recovery strategy, you can live a happy, healthy, purposeful life, which is where I'm at right now.
Man, General, it's so, I had you on before, and as I listen to you speak about it, it really amazes me. I guess, and this always happens to me. I apologize. I come in with script, some questions, and then I hear you talk and I go, you know what? I got more. I got to ask you these. When you talk about that, the bipolar being almost a superpower, and you had mentioned this to me before, one thing I have wanted to ask you is, you go through life almost as this high achiever. In your brain, you're this high achiever. You're achieving all these great things. What is that like to finally realize that maybe it wasn't all you? Maybe it was caused by something else, this bipolar disorder. How does that feel to come to, face that head on, that it was this bipolar that was helping me the whole time?
Well, you described it very well and very accurately. Bipolar disorder is an amazing disease that essentially will help and boost and enhance performance until it goes too high, gets too extreme, and then it brings you down. And, so my whole life from teenage years on, all the way up until, 2005 to 2007, 2008, even beyond that, really until I got to National Defense University, the bipolar disorder, it just helped me and boosted me. And so whatever natural abilities I had, it elevated them. So how does it feel? Well, it's kind of amazing because I have done a lot of research and, learned a lot about bipolar disorder, which is, my disease, chronic disease. And I realized that factually and objectively, what you said is true and accurate. So I don't really feel good about it or bad about it. It's just kind of the way it is. It's just truth.
Yeah, and I don't want to, and again, I don't even want to diminish anything that you've done, because obviously everything you've accomplished, it was there. Maybe you accomplished it to a bit of a higher level, but I could still, knowing what I do about you and the conversations we've had, I still think you would have been, a damn good general, right? You would have still been good. So I don't look at it that way, but it really amazes me, because when you first told me that before, that was last year, all the interviews I did, that was maybe one of the most amazing pieces of information that I didn't know about. When you explained that to me, the way that works, I was really taken aback. So, General, are there times now, though, where you look back and during your command, when you were feeling the way you were, like, do you ever look back and think, did I put myself at unnecessary risk, and the people I was leading, did I put them at unnecessary risk during this time?
Great question. So when I wrote the manuscript in the book, I decided to go back and get a hold of as many people as I could who were either my subordinates, peers, or superiors. And I asked them, I told them, I said, hey, look, I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I got fired from my job, forced to retire and hospitalized. Now, when we were together, did you see any of the following symptoms? And then I would sort of describe what bipolar disorder looks like, both the manic phase and the depressive phase, and then also about psychosis. And, in my younger years, every single person said, you were a great leader, you were super inspirational, very motivational, you did a great job, didn't see anything, that seemed, bad. Then when I was in my mid 40s and I was a battalion commander, it was basically the same thing, but then people started sprinkling in, but we really thought you were crazy. You were a madman. You were nuts. But they didn't say it in a bad way, like I should be hospitalized. They were like, you were really extreme. You were really out there. You were fun to be with. It was very invigorating, and so forth. But they started saying they thought I was crazy, and I really was. By the time I was a battalion commander, again, thinking about that spectrum of that bipolar spectrum, I was just below the level of real mania. I mean, and I went into real mania just a couple of years later in Iraq. Then it was very interesting talking to people about the Iraq experience, where I was a brigade commander for a full year. And, we had over 10,000 troops in the brigade. So it was a really huge organization, had a critical battlefield mission, and, very cutting edge. So same kind of thing, motivational, inspirational, did a great job, all that. But people did say, you really did seem out there, because I would do hours of PT when I wasn't out, circulating on the battlefield, hours of PT. And they thought that was extreme. On Sundays, I would go to 3, 4, 5 chapel services. I'd go to Catholic and Episcopalian and evangelical praise and worship. I'd go to Black gospel. I mean, it was extreme. And they said, we thought it was very extreme, all the church services you went to. And of course, that's a symptom called religiosity, where you just go over the top in terms of religion. The other thing that was very interesting is they did say that it seemed like I went into a state of depression every now and again. And the depression was noticeable because instead of being this energetic, enthusiastic guy who's talking to people and, an extrovert, I would withdraw into my office. I would be, I was low energy. I would be confused, and be indecisive. But in Iraq, those little dips into depression, they typically didn't last more than a half a day or a day at the longest. Now that changed later, where I went almost, a year. But so people pointed that out to me. They also said that my enthusiasm for combat and circulating on the battlefield and visiting and go and seeing all of our soldiers on every mission all over Iraq was extreme. And they said, your enthusiasm to get off the base camp and go out and see them was reckless. It was dangerous. You were putting your force protection team at risk. You didn't need to go out that much. A brigade commander, a lot of their work, really important, some of their most important work is from the headquarters, orchestrating and managing the war, not being out there seeing the troops. So that was a comment that sort of took me aback. And then after I made general and I started going up the ladder even further towards, ultimately at NDU where I got fired, people routinely were saying that I was over the top in terms of energy, enthusiasm, positivity, that I was sort of undisciplined and out of control. And I was late for meetings routinely. I was, way behind on my paperwork and administrative stuff, which there's always a lot to do. And so they started saying that I was kind of out of control and I was more interested in having fun and being the rock star than I was in buckling down and really doing a good job, in my general capacity. And then, of course, once I got to NDU and I went into full-blown mania in 2014, completely over the top, out of control, off the rails, all the symptoms of mania. Then people finally started really taking note that, hey, there's something wrong with this guy. And they started writing anonymous reports to my boss saying, here's the following, really crazy, bizarre, insane things General Martin is doing. And then so General Dempsey, the chairman, got all this, assessed it, did it, sort of did an investigation, and then came to the conclusion he needed to get me out of there. And he did me a huge favor because, he was doing it to protect and advance his university, but he also was doing it to protect me and my, family and my marriage. And I've been told by multiple doctors that when I was in that full-blown mania, I'm really lucky I didn't have a heart attack, a stroke, or a total breakdown, because mania, it's so extreme that it puts enormous stress on your organs and your heart and your brain. So anyway, I guess the answer to that is yes, people did start seeing things.
Okay, so good segue by you. I wanted to ask this. So you mentioned, and I think a lot of times as people not in the military, we forget how you're doing all this for us and for our protection, our freedom, but we're basically sharing, your family sharing you guys with us. Did you during this ever have any kind of guilt or fear that what you're doing, the recklessness, could lead to the end of your life, and then what impact that would have not only on the folks you were leading, but then the byproduct of your family, leaving the family behind?
For the most part, no, because my bipolar experience was predominantly mania. And when you're manic, you're basically high on these natural chemicals. It's way higher. I've had doctors tell me that the manic high is much higher than cocaine or ecstasy. That's how high you go. And you feel great. You think you're Superman. You're the smartest person in the world. So pretty much no, I didn't have any doubts, any concerns. I had no clue there was something wrong with me. The only time I felt there was something wrong was when I would go into depression. And I actually went to the doctor 3 times for depression and said, hey, I'm usually energetic. I have no energy. I feel really terrible, confused, withdrawn, indecisive. And all 3 times they said, you're fine. and they were completely wrong. So 3 times with depression, they were wrong. 3 times with mania, they were wrong. The only time that I did have, sort of a little bit of a spark that I'm going too far, this could be really dangerous, was actually on the battlefield in Iraq, where I was leaning too far forward. I was getting out there too far and, put myself at risk of being, killed or captured. And I actually got chewed out by my corps commander, he was the 3-star. I was a colonel. And he really yelled at me and let me have it. He said, "Damn it, Sapper," which was my call sign. He said, "I don't need you getting killed or captured, because if you do, I'll be screwed on the engineer missions." So he was upset with me that I was out there too far. But I didn't really see a problem with me because it was unrecognized. And I didn't see that I was doing anything harmful to my family or my employees.
So, General, being a general and the experiences you had, how difficult of an experience does it become ultimately when you become hospitalized? How is that? It's so different. How do you handle that?
Well, my hospitalization came after I had retired from active duty. I actually wish I had been hospitalized sooner, because it would have sped up my recovery and I wouldn't have been 2 years in bipolar hell. But when I was in such bad shape in 2016 that I went to a VA hospital, a good friend got me in, my wife helped me, and I met with the head psychiatrist. He interviewed me, and within 5 minutes, he said, "You need hospitalization. You are really out there." I wanted to die. I had nonstop ideations of my own death, which I'd be happy to talk about. But, well, I'll just tell you. One was that I thought people were spying on me and that they were going to try to get me arrested, convicted, put in jail, where I would be beaten, stabbed to death, and then die in a pool of my own blood, gurgling. Another one was this invisible force would grab me and throw me underneath a rapidly moving 18-wheeler, which would rip me apart. And I told him about those, and he said, "Whoa, those are what we call passive suicidal ideations." I never heard that before. No, because he had asked me, he said, "Do you have any morbid thoughts of death or dying?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to die. I don't want to kill myself, but I want to die. And here are the ideations I have." So anyway, I did 2 weeks in the inpatient facility, and then I did 4 more weeks living in the hospital in a dorm room, undergoing even more intensive therapy and treatment. But when I got hospitalized, I thanked the doctor. I said, "Thank you, doctor. I am really, really sick. My brain is really messed up. And I think going into inpatient is a huge step in the right direction, where I can get, a multidisciplinary team assessing me, therapy, medication, and living in a secure, safe environment that's just focused on me getting better." So I thanked him. And inpatient at the VA was a great experience. It was really positive. White River Junction, Vermont has a great VA hospital, and they treated me wonderful. And they helped me get on the right path to recovery, but I couldn't get my brain chemistry straight. And I was 6 more months in bipolar hell until they prescribed lithium. And then the depression and psychosis lifted, and I got on my road to recovery.
Well, General, obviously you're courageous in many ways, in my opinion, and I admire the hell out of you. Obviously a general, a mission. You wrote this book. What is your mission now? What are you hoping to accomplish by writing this book and making sure your story gets out there?
Great question. So as part of my recovery, I realized a few years ago that I didn't have a mission. When you're in the military, the first thing you do is ask, "What's the mission?" And then everything focuses and is clearly zeroed in on your mission. It drives everything, and it informs everything you do and the way you think. So I said, I got to have a mission. And so I thought about it for months and talked to some of those life coaches and some, people I really respected and some people at church and some older wise men. And I came up with the following mission: sharing my bipolar story to help stop the stigma, promote recovery, and save lives. That's it. And that's what I do every single day, either speaking, writing, conferring on, my bipolar story. And so, I've given probably close to 100 talks or podcasts. I've published over 20 articles. And then, last but not least, got the book done, which is really the culmination. And I think the book, and talking about the book, Bipolar General, My Forever War with Mental Illness, I think that is going to consume me for 2 to 3 years. My schedule is already filling up fast for, the next year. And so the interest in the book keeps growing and growing, and the sales of the book are getting more and more brisk. And Amazon even gave me a flag that says bestseller. So it's doing really well. It's interesting. So that's my mission. And the people that I'm mostly talking to are, the military has a lot of interest, particularly the Army and the Navy. And I think the other services will, catch on. The veterans, the VA, and all these different veterans groups and veterans nonprofits, very, very interested. Thirdly, and this blew me away, the professional medical community is absolutely on fire for this story. In fact, I've got over a dozen invitations to do what they call grand rounds, which is where at a hospital or med school, they get everybody together. And then there's a 30-minute presentation, 30-minute Q&A. I've got over a dozen of those. I've already done a few, another dozen coming up in the next months. I've got a very distinguished professor who's one of the top researchers on bipolar disorder. Her name is Professor Alex Liao, University of Illinois, Chicago. She's actually using the book, teaching her med school students. We're going to do 2 podcasts together. I've been a visiting lecturer, and I'm going to do a grand rounds. So, that's just one example of the interest in the book. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question on what my mission is.
No, and I can see it though, because, and I mentioned this to you earlier in the show, or maybe before we got on, but listen, I'll say it. I'm reasonably intelligent, but I'll stop there. Reasonably intelligent. But when I spoke to you last year about this, General, you have a way of framing it all, a very complicated, complex subject that comes across understandable. And I think the interest is there because you're putting it out there in a way that I think people can relate to. People that are experiencing it can now say they have somebody to look up to. Oh, that man went through it. I can deal with this. And then folks who may not, like I said, I've learned so much just from our 2 conversations and then reading the book. General, I never dreamed I would know this much about bipolar disorder in my life, right? I never thought I would, but I think that's a credit to you. And not that you would, but don't change the way you're delivering it, because it comes across authentic and it comes across in a way that guys like me, I understand it. So I'm sure people much smarter than me are seeing a lot of use for this. So keep that going. So I guess I'll end with this. I wanted to ask, as far as your recovery, you talk about it, it's an ongoing recovery. How's the ongoing recovery, and not just for yourself, the family dynamic, all of it, how you handling this day to day?
So the family is hugely important, because this whole experience of going into mania, getting fired, hospitalized, and so forth, it really turned not only my life upside down, it turned my wife's life upside down, and the whole family. There's a really good appendix in the book where my wife and sons and others give their testimony of what happened. But as far as the recovery goes, I pretty much, starting 7 years ago, had to kind of rebuild my marriage relationship with my wife, with the kids, because things were just so tumultuous. I would say it's come together very well. But over the 7-year period, I have had a few scary incidents that luckily only lasted about 24 hours, but they could have triggered a full-blown relapse into bipolar disorder again. One was a PTSD attack that happened during the Afghanistan, pullout. Another one was a panic attack where I thought I had been abandoned overseas in France, and but it didn't. But it scared me, and I panicked, and that was a really bad incident. And then the third one was where somebody I thought was my friend really viciously attacked me about, saying that my bipolar disorder had really hurt them and their family, and that I should pay them monetary damages. And so anyway, that really sent me into anger and rage, which was bad because it lasted a couple of weeks. And so that was all dangerous. And the family, though, is they all understand bipolar disorder because 2 of our 3 sons live with bipolar disorder as well. So everybody understands it. They know what the symptoms are. They can detect in me if I'm either going up too high or down too low, and then kind of caution me and talk about it, and then either get a hold of my therapist or my psychiatrist and try to take corrective action if necessary. But I would say things are going well. I've just got to keep a healthy balance and not get too revved up over, the whole book thing and, speaking and my mission, and, have downtime, time for, the wife and I to just relax and have fun. And so I have to work at that, put some white space in my calendar and schedule time to have fun and relax.
Well, sounds like solid advice. Sounds like, obviously, I didn't think it was easy for you, but it sounds like you're coping and you have a good support system. What would you say? I want to end with this because I think this is really important, not just for bipolar, but mental issues in general. What do you say to all of those general who are suffering in silence? Because I think they need to hear it, and they need to hear it from somebody like you.
I would say, if you're suffering, go see a medical professional, go get checked out. And, if there's nothing wrong in terms of the actual, the physicality of the brain. So if they can't determine any kind of mental condition or mental illness, then you probably need to, work with somebody that can help you get your life back on track and live a happy, fulfilling life. But if they detect that there is something wrong, with the physiology of the brain, and you have some sort of mental illness, you need a diagnosis and you need treatment. Because as I said earlier, these diseases, these illnesses can kill you and ruin your family and everything you value. But if you get good treatment and you get your brain chemistry in balance, typically through medication, and you get therapy, learning how to deal with, the circumstances of life, and you live a healthy life, diet, exercise, plenty of sleep, et cetera. And then you do what I call the 5 Ps. First, purpose. Figure out your life purpose and then pursue it, because that'll lift your spirits up. And you should have a purpose that's larger than yourself and that serves others. And I told you what mine is, sharing my bipolar story. People is the second P. Get around, have a network of people who are fun, happy, energetic, who, make you happy. Third, live in a place that enables you to do the things you want to do. Like, we moved from New England, which is beautiful, but it's so cold and gray and frigid and dark and icy in the winter. That was exacerbating my depression and my bipolar. So we moved to Florida, and Florida is really awesome. I mean, it's sunny, bright, warm. And so it was a great move for us. The 4th P is perseverance. Once you get on a schedule and a treatment plan, you have to persevere, because you're going to have bumps in the road, and you have to fight through them and not give up. And then the 5th P is presence. It's the ability to get outside of your own head and get away from your own thinking and think about what you're thinking. Because oftentimes what's in our own head is wrong, it's inaccurate, it's the source of our troubles. So presence is really important. Like I've found myself getting outside of my own head, thinking about my own thinking and saying, Greg, the things you're thinking about are wrong. So stop thinking them, think about something else. And so that's the steps to recovery that I think anybody who has any kind of a mental health condition should really pursue. And by the way, the healthy living and the 5 Ps, they really apply to anybody. You don't have to have bipolar disorder to follow that guidance.
I was thinking it as you said it, General. I was thinking the same thing. Well, again, I am so honored that we connected again. It's in the back there, but I have my copy that you sent me, Bipolar General. I will absolutely always going to be, for me, one of my treasured items. I really appreciate that. I appreciate having this bit of a relationship with you and being able to connect. It's been, like I said, an honor. General, I believe you mentioned Amazon. The book's available pretty much wherever books are sold, right?
Yes, wherever books are sold. And the 3 big ones are Amazon, but Amazon has already run out of books several times. And so people are going to Barnes and Noble, which seems to have no trouble delivering. And then the Naval Institute Press, who's the actual publisher. And I would also say, if you have any trouble, go to my website, www.bipolargeneral.com. And when you go to it, the landing page, there'll be all 3 of those sources for books, and they all have accurate, up-to-date links. So anyway, yeah, it's book selling very, very well. And the feedback from people has been incredibly positive, and just people, thanking me that it's already helping them. They're giving the book to their friends, et cetera. So it's pretty gratifying.
Well, you did an awesome job. What you're doing, again, I commend you. Maybe it goes without saying, but I appreciate, and have family members in the military. I am so grateful for the service that you all have given. And I want to say thanks too. I appreciate the fact that your family was willing to share you with all of us, General. So thanks to them. But again, it's been great having you on. Everyone, please, I highly recommend it. Check out the Bipolar General. I'll make sure to have the links to get the books in the show notes, and also to General Martin's website. So, General, thanks again. Have continued success and good health, and I look forward to following you in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you, Charles. Great show, and you're doing a fantastic job.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you again.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening, and remember, never hibernate on your goals.